Good morning, gentlemen. So Josh is up in northern Michigan right now. We got Marty in Flagstaff, and I'm here in Texas. So we're representing three different time zones, and we're getting into one of the most divisive subjects that we possibly can this morning. And we're just talking about how on TikTok I've noticed there's basically two driving forces when it comes to division. I mean, there's other ones, of course, as well, race being one of them, but religion and politics. And Marty, you just said that those two things are in bed together. So before we get into the topic, can you give us a little bit about your background? Because obviously you were very heavily involved in the church for a good portion of your life. So could you walk us through that?
Yeah, I was a Catholic priest for 15 years, 22 total in ministry. So it was my life. It was my lifestyle. It was what I was living and breathing. And after so long, I couldn't handle the institutional life anymore. I mean, your military, it's very similar.
Right.
You could only live that so long, and then you gotta make a change. For me, I had to make a change because I felt, excuse me, I felt I had outgrown it, and just couldn't handle. It was killing me. It was suffocating me.
Yeah. Were you questioning things a lot? Because you were relating it to the military. And when I got out, so I did 8 years in the Ohio Army National Guard, and towards the end there, I was really questioning things. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, we waste so much time and money, and we're not really getting great training. Like, it really made me question things. So was that part of your, reasoning for exiting?
Well, it's weird. Like if I look back at that moment, I've been doing a lot of writing about it recently. There was the experience of leading up to leaving and then actually leaving. And leading up to leading, it was I'm letting these people down. I had a lot of that going on. And then when I finally said I had to take a leave, I felt like I was kicked in the ass while I was down. And then I'm like, for all these years, I thought they cared about me. But that it didn't necessarily feel like it at that point. And I'm like, well, what am I doing in the first place?
When you said that you felt like you outgrew it, what exactly did you mean by that?
So, for me, the thing that drove me as long as I did was the theology. I still love theology, and studying it. And the more I studied it and taught it, I felt like my theology kept growing, expanding. My understanding of who God is. But even as I taught it or I studied it, then I'd have to go back into this box that I was expected to live in within the institution. And that box just started to feel like it was smaller and smaller while my theology had outgrown the box, essentially.
Love the way you put that.
I'm curious about that because I went to Catholic schools from preschool through 12th grade, and I think I generally had a defined attitude towards religion just right out of the gate. um,
What's
but
interesting is it like that exists more with people that go to Catholic school than not.
It's funny.
and maybe I had a similar experience to you, just in a different way of just thinking that religion was putting me in a box, and how I that didn't I didn't like that, and I wasn't going to have it in my life. Um, when you say your theology expanded, where exactly did it expand to? What like where's the disconnect between the box of religion and where you were getting to spiritually and mentally?
Right. Because in like church life is very much driven by, like everything else, by politics, by bureaucracy, by it's a business, and all of those things I felt got in the way of God, what we were there for in the first place,
Well,
which was to help people connect with God.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so I just, not just, but over the last year, I have started reading the Bible, and it was something that I tried to do in the past, and I think I was trying to read it too literally and not
Did
read
you
it.
start from the beginning?
No, I started at John, and so I read John, and then I read Genesis, and then my spiritual coach
That's
suggested.
that that's a That's a good place. Those
Yeah.
two together is a good place.
Yeah, I felt like it was insightful because I've read other parts and like trying to read it in order didn't make sense to me. But my coach suggested that, and then I read Matthew, and now I'm on Luke, and I just read a very short amount every day because I really sit and I try to process it, and I text my spiritual coach, and we exchange our thoughts on the verse that we read for the day. But it's there's this theme in the Bible about money and greed and all of those things, and yet you look at some of these churches, which has always blown my mind. And like, I was driving by, I'm in Texas, so some of these churches are ridiculous,
Huge.
and they're brand new. It's like these cost millions of dollars to construct, and it's like, isn't that kind of defeating the purpose? And do you need that? Like, I've never felt the need to go to a building and connect with God. My personal place is outside. I feel more connected with God outdoors than anywhere else.
Me too. I mean, Texas has probably one of the. That's where Joel Osteen is, I believe, in Texas.
Somewhere in Texas,
So
yeah.
one of the largest ones is there.
Yeah, it's crazy. Mega church. Like, isn't that an oxymoron?
Yeah, like the guy with a yacht and everything else.
Right. This guy's
I
teaching
just
me how to
learned-
be closer to God? Like, that makes no sense.
Correct.
I mean, I don't want to necessarily inject this in here just haphazardly, but isn't I don't know, when cult members or yogis or not yogis but gurus and stuff like that, when they get to that type of power, don't they typically get arrested?
That's a good point.
True.
So
I mean, someone did, because I'm part of a God conversation next week, and I was meeting with the group that's sponsoring it, and they said, well, like, what is it about religion you think that keeps people coming? And I don't even know if it's necessarily about God all the time. I think it's just there's a degree of safety that comes with it. And ironically, a sense of certainty, even though there's no certainty in God. That's the thing.
Damn, that's true. And it's, oh man, you just said something in there that no certainty in God. So, I mean, that's everything. I think we as human beings are
Correct.
drawn to certainty, and we've had this conversation about the unknown, and it's like nothing is certain. You have no idea what's going to happen in the next second, let alone 5 years from now or 10 years from now. The best that you can do is take actions that you believe will lead you to the ideal
Correct.
place that you want to be. And I've never thought about that from a spirituality standpoint, for sure. So what do you think the difference is, in your opinion, of spirituality versus formal religion?
I mean, I say it a little bit differently. I speak of biblical faith versus institutional faith.
Mm-hmm.
I think are two very different things. Institutional is probably what you're most familiar with when it comes to religion. It's dogmatic. This is the prescription you follow if you're going to be a part of this specific religion. I don't think that requires faith at all, quite honestly. You just, all right, I believe it. That's the extent of it. Biblical faith, my reference point for a biblical faith is someone like Moses, who it was always about one step, and we do that in our own business. One step into the unknown.
I was going to say, I'm like, this sounds awfully familiar, Marty.
I know, but so when I had left, I still say this. I learned more about faith by leaving than I ever did by staying, because I had to learn how to trust that voice within myself. The institution will tell you what that voice says, whether you believe it or not. But I had to learn to trust it myself, and every day I had to wake up, and I'm like, is this choice moving me towards freedom? That's my connection with Moses. It was always about moving towards freedom, even though they like run into a river. There's still one more choice that's going to take them further into that freedom that they wanted. So that I describe it more as biblical faith versus institutional faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think when I'm interested to hear how both of you feel about this, but when I hear institutional faith, when I hear the word institution, I think cannot be questioned. Like, is that part of it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
this is the way it
Yeah.
is, and you can't ask questions because I don't know. I think if you can't ask questions, I mean, whoever you are asking the questions to, probably don't have very good answers to it.
Yeah, otherwise you're a heretic.
What, I don't even know what that means.
You're like going against it. Yeah, you're not supposed to question.
And I think that's why I didn't really connect with at least the Catholic faith in school, because I questioned everything and and challenged a lot of things growing up. And so, I mean, this is just purely my personality speaking, and not necessarily for the masses. But I'm just curious, just on an institutional level, religion, politics, whatever, the military. Like, it just makes me wonder, who does institutional whatever it is, who does that work for? Like religion, like who does that institutional religion? Is that like straight down the center? And I don't know, 50% of the population. Like, is that generally speaking who institutional religion works for, and then the other 50% are on some fringe spirituality or
Right.
atheist or whatever it is?
Like us.
Yeah, it makes me wonder who the target audience is and who really connects with institution, like the pure definition of institutional religion.
Well, I mean, it's self-serving. First of all, most times I think it's self-serving. It's about keeping the institution going, but I
Yeah,
think it's also the if you're taught over and over again that the world around you is chaos, well, we're going to sell the message that we're peace, we're order, we're all these other things. So it's attractive when the world feels chaotic to you.
I always thought about this. I used to have I had this observation. I can remember the moment that I had this observation, and it was a friend of mine's dad, and we were at church. I think it had to have been for a wedding or funeral or something like that. But it was a Catholic mass, and there was communion. And even though I went through my first Holy Communion, I kind of separated myself from the church shortly after that, because when I was a kid was the time where there's a lot of really bad, controversial stuff coming out about the Catholic Church, with everything that was going on in the 90s. So after that, we moved from Connecticut to New York, and I kind of was like, Mom, like, I don't want to be a part of that anymore. It doesn't make sense to me. And my parents were great about it. They didn't force me to go or anything like that. But fast forward to this was sometime in college, and I'm at this mass, and I'm watching my friend's dad walk, and he was like, man, and I don't mean this in like a negative way, but he's a very simple man, like, and I'm watching it, I'm like, and then I take a look, and I see all of these people walking up, and I'm like, man, these are some simple motherfuckers, like, and I didn't and I'm like, I mean that in the fact that this doesn't make sense to me, yet they're just following it blindly, and I wonder if it truly makes sense to them or not. And I often thought that institutionalized religion was for people who didn't want to question things, who were just going along with the status quo, and felt that level of comfort by saying, hey, if I do this and I don't question things, then I'm a better person because of it. I don't know if any of that makes sense or resonates, but that's how I felt in that moment.
Yeah, kind of like, just tell me what to think. Like, I don't want to have to think about it. Just tell me what to think. Oh, I mean, I met many people like that in that world. And if you question, if you brought any sense of doubt to what they did believe, well, that's when I'd hear about it.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, and that's what I see online. It's like, and people are. If I say that I'm spiritual, or I love this one, so I wear a cross around my neck, and to me, this is a reminder of love. Like, so recently, I've changed one of my alignment values from impact to love, because I feel if I'm focused on love, then I'm focused on doing something or saying something that is more positive, where impact can be divisive. Like, I can make an impact in a negative manner, but if I'm acting in love, then chances are it might not always be positive, but my intent is to be positive. And people will see this, and just attack me and be like, you're a fucking Christian and you're indoctrinating all this stuff. I'm like, you don't even know what this means to me. I'm like, you're interpreting it based on your interpretation, but my spirituality is personal to me. I have a personal relationship with God. And I read the Bible, but I don't even consider myself a Christian, which confuses people. I'm like, this is a guideline to me. Like, this is a textbook. This is for me to read and interpret and become closer to him. I feel bad for you that you don't have that. I feel bad for you that you are so disconnected from spirituality or nature or whatever it is, like part of the natural world, that you look to politicians and celebrities for your guidance. We all worship something.
For your, yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. The whole, this is my interpretation. As someone who's read it and preached it and studied it and everything else, there's two central messages, I think, from Jesus. One is fear not, which is the most common of all the Gospels. I think it's 137 times those words are said. The other one is follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me. Somewhere along the lines, we came up with this theory, and that's all it is a theory, that when the follow me part seems to end when we get to the cross. There's nothing in there that says, stop, I got it from here. Nowhere does that happen. The follow me takes you all the way through the cross, which I think I think you would agree with that as well. Like, you have to go through that experience yourself in order to go into the person you're meant to be, however you want to describe that. But I think that's one of the pieces that has really screwed up religion. That somehow Jesus got it from here, and I could pass off all responsibility to him for what's going on and for sin and everything else. I think that has done more harm than most things in religion.
Jesus, take the wheel, like, fuck it.
Correct.
I'm just letting go. Like, it's all your fault. Well, I think we look at that in politics and the government too. It's like, we don't want to assume any responsibility for what's going on in the country.
Correct.
It's all their fault. And I'm like,
Correct.
well, they're the ones that caused the problems in the first place, so why do we expect that they're going to fix them?
It's all victim mentality.
It's one of our favorite words.
I'm not steeped or proficient in the Buddhist faith whatsoever. But I have attended Buddhist recovery meetings, and within the first, 20 seconds of every recovery meeting, they talk about the concept of personal responsibility. And it took me aback, because everything else, recovery related or religion related, it was all of that, don't worry, this isn't you, this is a disease, and all that. And I felt like something was disconnected in that message. And it was kind of like, giving me a little bit of a victim mentality a little bit. And then this Buddhist recovery meeting was like, no, you've got a piece in this. Like, don't just think that this happened to you. You need to, think through this and take personal responsibility for this. And so that instantly made me very interested in just exploring the Buddhist faith. But I had a question on spirituality, I guess as it relates to religion. But there's this cliche saying that I see periodically, and I understand it. I don't necessarily love it, but it keeps coming back into my head. There's a saying. Did I drop?
No, you're good.
No.
There's a saying that something to the effect of religion is for those people that don't want to go to hell. Spirituality is for people who have been there and don't want to go back.
Damn, I've never heard that one.
And it's always given me pause, because I feel like kind of what brought me back to spirituality is recovery. And so I went through my own personal type of hell on earth.
Hell, absolutely.
Through that whole experience, and it made me think of, Marty, in your case, although different, if you kind of went through the same process in, not knowing if you wanted to leave the church, going through the process of leaving the church, and then after the fact, I assume that whole process you went through was extremely painful, and I'm curious if that saying resonates with you in your process.
Yes. And you could have a whole conversation about hell and how that is taught as well. Because it's still about separation, right? Like religion wants to separate when God pulls together. I think again, it's part of the flaw of the system. But yeah, that's very much a part of, I would ascribe to that 1,000 times over.
What about faith, Marty? So you were talking about faith earlier. Like, what does faith mean to you? Because you used it, both from a formal or not. I forget how you said it. Not indoctrinated, but institutionalized faith, and then biblical faith.
Biblical faith.
Yeah, to me, faith means trust. Like that's what
Big
I
time.
mean when I say. Is that how you interpret it as well?
Yeah, and I said like that was my experience when I was leaving ministry. It, it was learning to trust myself in the process, and learning to trust that voice within me that was moving me towards that freedom. So yeah, I think that's the easiest way to describe it is trust. And sometimes that's hard because there's so much pressure to react to things, and somehow at times I have to just be able to be in it until it's clear what that is.
Josh, what about you? How do you define spirituality for yourself?
I was just thinking about that. It's evolving, and I think where it had. I mean, it comes down to trust, but it's having faith in something outside of myself,
Yeah, that's how I feel
and
about it too.
and I mean that a lot of that comes from not comes from recovery, but kind of snapped me into attention within recovery. In that anybody who's had a drug or alcohol issue, like at some point they become the sun. Like they become, it's a self-centered, path that you're on in addiction. And at some point you got to take a step back and realize that, you're not the only one. Like there's something bigger out there than you.
Yeah, yeah. I think part
I
of
know
that for
when
me. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I taught it for you. I taught theology and philosophy for years, and then during COVID, after I'd already left ministry, I filled in at a community college teaching philosophy. Very different experience. That was my first time kind of in the secular sphere. But I remember I got this question more often than I did in previous life. Why should I believe in God? But for me, it's similar to what you just said, Josh. There's a very practical reason for it, if anything, because it reminds me that there's something bigger than myself. It's so easy to make yourself the center of your world. There's a practical reason to believe in something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, I said that recently. It's like I had this realization. I'm literally driving down the road, and I was thinking about how everybody's reality is unique to them. Even though we all exist in the same world, in the same country, the same state, the same town, same neighborhood, whatever, my reality is completely different than my neighbors. And that was a big realization that I think, like you were saying, we all think that we're the center of the world. Like everything is going, no, there's 8 billion other people out there, and every one of our situations are different. And I think that's part of like my alignment value of love is trying to keep that in mind when I'm interacting with people and asking them questions and all of those things. But for me, the spirituality it's like Josh said, it's believing in something greater, and for me that's a connected consciousness. Like I have had experiences in my life recently, sometimes through the use of psychedelics, but it just it was so real to me that it was hard for me to change and go back to not believing that we are all part of something bigger than ourselves, whether you want to call it God, whether you want to call it the universe, whatever your interpretation of that, I think if we all kept that in mind, then that's where love comes from. Because, like, hey, when I'm looking at you, I'm looking at me, and we're all part of that same thing. Did, or for a question for both of you, did you experience, was there like one or two things, because I look at my spiritual journey and I kind of had this like slow awakening, like it wasn't one thing that happened that was like, hey, maybe there's more going on here, but it was multiple things. Was there anything that either of you could point to that were like, oh shit? So for Josh it sounds like recovery was a big part of it, but Marty, start with you, and then maybe Josh, you could add on to what you were talking about before.
Yeah, so after I left, which was January of 2019, my father was dying at the same time, not even knowing that at the time. It it became. I started to think there's got to be something bigger at play, that I somehow left at just the right time, because I was now able to have time with my family that I did not have before. And all of a sudden, here I am. And about 3 months into it, I guess, is when my father had gone in the hospital and then died 2 months later. And it was when he died, I'm like, I think it was in that moment that I realized I can never go back, because it really felt like there was something bigger at play. That it gave me some semblance of, all right, I'm doing the right thing. I'm going in the right direction, because no way could I have orchestrated all of this myself.
Right.
Something bigger had to be at play in it.
Yeah, I love that interpretation. Josh, what about you? Anything else other than obviously recovery playing a big role in it?
No, that's basically it. It's kind of what snapped me to
Straightforward.
attention. It's what brought everything back. It but like you, it was kind of a slow roll, and I think that's because I rejected religion for so long, that when I heard in the readings people talking about God and higher power and spirituality, like my mind went to Catholicism and the nuns screaming at me in my face, and threat of beating me with a ruler, and detentions, and all this stuff came by flooding, and going to hell if I do this and this. So it's like, no, why would I want that? But then
I mean,
as I
you
let
probably had it coming.
Yeah, I was. Maybe they didn't beat you. Maybe they didn't beat you enough, man.
but as I started speaking, and people started correcting me, saying, "No, this isn't religion." Like over and over and over and over. Finally, I got it. And I'm like, okay, this isn't religion. And that's when it started to really creep in. But coincidentally, Marty and I actually have a mutual friend in the Baltimore area who he had an experience, and I can't remember if he went to a cathedral for mass, but it was almost like he had this kind of physical experience where he felt like he was being pulled to the altar during a mass, and I'm going to butcher the whole story. It's been a while since I've heard it, but he said that he has a day where he realized that this was the path that he needed to pursue, like a day, an experience, an event, and he he was pulled into the priesthood, which coincidentally he subsequently left, but but hearing his story is interesting, because every other story that I hear about this is kind of like a knowing from birth type thing, or like a slow roll type thing. But he had an actual event where like he became certain that this is the path that he had to follow.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. To like where it became certain for, because like for me, like I said, it was a slow roll, and there was like a couple of different things that led up to it. Number one, and it sounds funny, but I was actually watching Yellowstone, and there was an episode where there was like wild horses, and they were trying to like corral him, and there's just a scene of these wild horses running along this like mountain range, and I'm looking at it and I'm just like, how's that an accident? Like, how is something as majestic as wild horses and this landscape and this beauty? Like, I was overwhelmed by just the beauty of it. And I know it's a TV show, but I started questioning. I'm like, that's real. Those are real horses. It's a real landscape. And I'm like, how is that just like a happy little accident? In the words of Bob Ross. So that was kind of like when I started questioning things. And then the next one, I'm sitting at the top of Emery Peak in Big Bend National Park, 360-degree view of the whole park, and I was just overwhelmed with emotion. Like, holy shit, it was the first time in my life where I had that feeling where, oh man, I'm not the center of the world. Like, there's so much more, and I'm so small and insignificant, and that was an aha moment. And then reading the book Many Lives, Many Masters, which was referred or recommended to me by our friend Lena. And I read that and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, well, this makes a lot of sense to me. I'm like, I can wrap my head around the concept in that book. And then I started thinking, I'm like, okay, let's assume that the concept in this book where there is souls that elevate to different levels of, existence, and there's one master soul. I'm like, I could see how that could be interpreted as religion. Like, so by making it human, I could see how that concept could be religious. And then psychedelics, experiencing death in a plant journey and ascending to a different plane of existence was another big one. And then recently I've felt like I've been getting downloads, like where I'm sitting there and I'm kind of just thinking, I'm deep in thought. It happened to me last night, actually. I'm really deep in thought, and it's a sensation. It's almost like this split second of overwhelming, I just can't describe it any other way, but this physical sensation where I just received information from somewhere externally from me. And that happened last night because so a lot of what we've transitioned the social media to, Marty, on like the short form platform on TikTok, is really questioning things and like, hey, like, isn't it weird that we do this or we think that or we believe this or whatever? And I've connected with this dude on there. I actually don't even know his name yet, but he is completely disconnected from, so like, he's on TikTok, but the things that he's saying is like, holy shit, like this guy is removed himself from the thought process of modern society completely. And last night when I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about this shit, I'm like, man, this really is the Matrix. Like, it is, once you're awake and you start questioning and you start peeking behind the curtain, there's no going back. And I was sitting there thinking last night, I'm like, is this just going to get worse? Like, am I going to go fucking crazy? Like, am I ever going to have some level of normalcy in my life again? And then I just got this sensation, this overwhelming feeling of, be careful, is what it felt like to me. Like, it was like a warning, like, you're on a track and there is no turning down once you get, or turning around once you get to a certain point. And I've had those experiences a couple times recently, and I can't remember what the other ones were. But yeah, it for me, it's been a process. But now, at this point in time, I personally am certain that there is something else, that this isn't just an act. Why do we have consciousness? Like, and I think why is the most powerful question that we can ask ourselves, and we don't ask it enough, because we're gonna get to a point when you ask yourself why, there's one of two results. One, you can't answer why, and then that's an opportunity to learn. Or two, you can answer why, and it doesn't make any fucking sense to you, and now you're in a different predicament, right? So, I don't know. That was a lot there, but I don't know how you guys feel about any of that.
I don't know how to parse all of that.
Sorry.
Other than what I did think of while you were speaking was, I think the important thing to keep in mind, because I've seen this happen many times, it's very easy to compare my experience to your experience. Yeah. And I think people do this all the time when it comes to, they want this experience when it comes to God, and it doesn't happen. it could be happening. They just don't see it. They don't. They're missing what's actually happening. And so I thought of that while you were speaking. Like your experience can be. I've had many experiences in nature like you have. I can relate to that entirely. But some of the other stuff, it's not my experience. But that doesn't mean I haven't experienced God in my own way, in a different way. I think that's important to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
I have something not necessarily about Kyle, what you just were talking about, but something you said before.
He was
When you were
preaching
talking about
at the moment.
when you were talking about spirituality, it made me think that when I have talked to people about spirituality, and especially in plant medicine type forums, it's almost like we agree on, I don't know, 85% of things, and then the other maybe 80% of things, and then the other 15 to 20% is just like your flavor on spirituality. There's no like hard rules, there's no like certainties. It's just like, this is what I feel type stuff. And so as you were talking about that, and I was thinking about my own experience, it made me just sit there and wonder, like, on the flip side of that, there's religion, and people fight over religion. like there's these certainties and this knowing, and these people are so rooted in their beliefs and their church and in their faith that it's like we go to wars or we have gone to wars over this kind of stuff. And it made me
do. There's one being fought currently.
Right. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. But it made me just wonder, in the big scheme of things, like if we could reverse, 4,000 years, whenever the first religion was started, I don't know, does religion mess up spirituality? Like, is that something detrimental to the spirituality and the collective consciousness of a society?
I think there's value in religion, and I would say that to this day. I mean, the church got me where I am today.
Yeah.
I think there's value in it. I think the issue that happens in religion is it never grows up. It's still operating on a very childlike mindset.
That makes sense.
Which doesn't work if you're trying to grow. So I think there's value in it, but at some point, either it has to grow up or you leave. I left.
Well, I think, and what you said there, Marty, is like it doesn't grow because you can't question it. And how can you grow
Correct.
if you think that what this is in this box and there's nothing else outside of it, so you can't grow. It's like a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right? If you believe that you know everything, you're never going to grow.
And it's still Father knows best. That's essentially what it is.
It's a good point too. I think too, Josh, my interpretation of it, and I agree with you, Marty. Like, I don't think that this goes back to an argument about other things too. Like when people say capitalism is bad, or guns are bad, or religion is bad. It's like, no, like all of those are just things. Like it's people and how they interpret them and how they leverage it for their own benefit.
Distort them.
What's that?
They distort.
Yeah, they bastardize it.
Yeah.
Like capitalism isn't bad. It's a system. A gun is just a thing. Like it. I get it that it is intended to be a weapon, but again, without a human being behind it, it cannot be good or bad. Same thing with anything else. So I think that's part of my interpretation on that. But I do think personally that religion can get in the way of spirituality because to me, spirituality is an individual thing. It is your relationship with whatever you believe in, the universe, nature, God. And if you paint yourself in a box made of rules, well, then it's really hard for you to have a personal relationship based on somebody else's rules and interpretation of that. So I think religion, again, is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it can get in the way for some people of their own connection with their interpretation of God.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like I say this every single interview that we do, but I think it does come down to people, and it's because we pervert and bastardize everything: capitalism, society, religion,
Technology,
social media, anything and everything.
literally.
It starts off with
It still goes, and so goes back to the victim mentality. It's
Absolutely.
still the victim mentality.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like with any of these things, social movements, whatever it may be, it all starts with good intentions, and then we screw it up. it's
Correct.
You know what I think though? Like one thing that and I'm not saying this is true, but I was just thinking about it. Stoicism. And it reminded me, I thought of Stoicism when you were talking about Buddhism, Josh, and how Stoicism is based on you. Like it is ownership. It is the ownership mentality. And I was like, one, I wonder if the victim mentality and the power of the ownership mentality is why Stoicism kind of fizzled out, right? Or you can even like some people use stoic in like a bad way, like oh he's stoic, he doesn't have emotion or anything like
Yes,
that.
yes, yes,
It's
yes.
not
Yeah.
that. I mean, I have a lot of emotion, but I also want to look at myself before I point the finger at anybody else because if I realize that, and this goes into your business, Marty, is if I'm the problem, then I'm also the solution, and there's a lot of power in that. But if we all thought that way in society, like especially in Western society, the system wouldn't be very happy about that.
Yeah, it would start to undo it.
yeah,
We have so much power individually, and I think that's what people forget. Like we think that in order to change the world, we have to impact 8 billion people when in reality it starts with us. And then we can just impact the people around us, and if we all did that in a positive way, then it would go a long way. And I think that's part of the foundation of Defiantly Human. It's like let's take our power back and get back to living as human beings are intended to. And I'm going to ask this question on TikTok today. It's like if there was no pressures from society, like if you didn't have to worry about societal pressure or family pressure or whatever, what would you be doing right now? How would you be living life? And I can almost guarantee that nearly everybody would give some form of, oh, I'd be, like living next to the ocean or in the mountains somewhere and not worrying about this stuff. And it would be a lot closer to the way that human beings had evolved for hundreds of thousands of years compared to the last 200 where we're seeing the explosion of technology.
And a majority would be different than what they're currently living.
Oh, yeah, 100%, myself included.
Yeah.
But I'm working towards that thing,
Toward
and I'm
correct.
happy in the present.
Kyle, you just said something that I've been going down a rabbit hole on, and,
Oh
and
boy.
this it kind of goes along with downloads that I've received, and I think this is it's a lot of stuff coming together all at once. Me, at the beginning of this past week, being able to slow down on the landscaping business, and then really a week from now, being able to really reduce my hours down to just a couple a week. I feel like just with that time and space, it's allowed my mind and maybe my spirituality to catch up because I've been so inundated with just, everything for the past 6 months that that's all I've been able to think about. I have begun to just, I guess, wake up to the fact and question the fact that it feels like, I don't know, 80%, 90% of the lives that people are living today are just manufactured out of technology, is creating things in people's lives that they think they need to, stay up on and that they need to participate in, personal style and clothing and image and ego and all this kind of stuff. It's like we've deviated so far from our basic needs that it's like we concern ourselves with so much shit that doesn't matter, and we create these whole lives on, oh, I gotta wear these clothes because this person is gonna think this and this group wears this kind of stuff and all this kind of stuff. And then social media is a whole nother thing of people just spewing their venom on each other. Maybe not even necessarily because they have a point, but because they're so broken inside that they feel like they need to release this venom out on other people. So without going into 100 different examples, what it's really made me reflect on is the fact that our lives today are so far beyond survival and truly, I mean, if you were to ask those same people, like, what would be different about their lives, probably most people would say family. They would want more free time. They would want more, whatever. Getting back to the basics. Like if you were to ask those people how they would improve their lives, I doubt people would say, I want more social media. I want more ego. I want more of all this other bullshit that they concern themselves with. It would actually be the reduction of all that kind of stuff. And more to a basic form of living.
Well, yeah, and we are simple creatures. We like to believe that we're not. Like we like to believe that and these are all just my opinions, but I think we like to believe that we're more evolved than we actually are. And I think technology is a part of that. We think that we're evolved because technology is evolved, where in reality technology has advanced drastically, especially in the last 100 years, but we haven't. So we're fighting our biological programming many times, because we think that we're further along than we are. And we're inundated with information, like you said. Think about the decisions that we make every single day now. The amount of decisions that we make compared to the amount of decisions we made 250 years ago. 250 years ago, it was mostly get up and don't do whatever I need to do to not die. And now it's what clothes am I going to wear? Who am I going to talk to on social media? I got 4 fucking jobs. I'm starting a business. What am I going to eat? Like, it's just fucking crazy. What car am I going to buy? I got to pay these 15 different fucking bills this month. I think that so many people, I said this yesterday, was, like all these people that live in the city, and I'm not saying that problems don't exist in rural areas when it comes to mental health or anything like that, although some people interpret it that way, but you're living in fucking chaos. Like I'm driving through Atlanta a couple weeks ago and I'm just like, why do people do
Awful.
this to themselves? I'm like, this is literally fucking torture. Like I sat in traffic for an hour. There was no accident. There was no construction. It was just traffic. And I'm like, so there's so many people out there that spend thousands of dollars and countless hours of their time on therapy. And I'm like, you ever think that maybe you just need to simplify your fucking life? Like, and get rid of some of the chaos, and a lot of these problems would take care of themselves. I know for a fact I'm happier when I'm out in my garden watering and digging my hands in the dirt and pulling weeds than I am. Yesterday was I was fucking shoveling rocks. It sucked. Like physically it sucked, but it was mindless. So I was just present in the moment and I was out in the sunshine and it was a break from reality. Even in being in Asheville, sleeping in a tent for a couple days and being very present, it was so much less stressful than everyday fucking life.
But I think it's also being present in your body in those moments. I think that's one of the, like, we're so much in our heads that those moments kind of force us down into more the feeling level, what's going on inside me, that it's easy to miss because we're in our heads so much.
What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think is something that we can do more of in modern society, Marty, to get us more grounded? Because I was thinking about that. Josh, you said something that made me think about it. But we spend so much time on other things, and we don't spend nearly as much time on ourselves, like reflecting, questioning. So, Marty, what do you think is something that's most people could do that would help benefit them feeling grounded, less chaotic? Does that make sense?
You've already answered the question. It's go outside. I've done many outdoor retreats, including one up in Acadia National Park, and I would just sit there for like hours and hours and hours. I was always amazed at the people that would walk through. Like I wasn't even present, even though I'm sitting right there. Walk through, take photos, move on. They don't even stop to even realize where they are and take in the moment. It's more about the photo and move.
Yes.
there's something about the outdoors though that I was reading or I listened to a podcast once about the poet Mary Oliver, who most of her poetry is about nature, and they had asked her why, like why nature, and some of it had to do with her childhood and trauma that she had faced, but nature became the place where it she was free of all judgment. Nature will not judge you, and it's a reflection of who you are.
Damn.
And so she spent a lot of her life outdoors because of that experience as a kid, because that's she felt most safe there.
I love that.
I get that.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I think another thing too, I agree with you, and doing it alone. I don't think we spend nearly
Yes.
as much time alone, and I'm horrible at that. Like I'm definitely guilty of that, but just being alone outdoors with no cell phone, honestly, that was one of the most impactful days that I've had in the last couple of years was I took a hike. I just cleared my calendar one day. This was when I was still living back in Ohio. It was the day that I discovered my alignment values because I didn't have any distractions and I was free to question myself and think through those questions. And the question that I asked was actually a question that Aaron had asked me. It was, who are you and what do you stand for? And I couldn't answer that question. And that day that I was completely alone in the woods with no cell phone and just a journal, I was like, oh, like now I have the space to answer that question. And it was the answer to that question has been absolutely life changing for me. It's made me more intentional. It's made me more clear on what I want out of my life. And, but it's very hard to answer those deep questions when you don't have the space to do it.
It's first teacher. Nature is first teacher. I mean, it's the very first thing in the Bible as well.
True. Yeah. Fuck.
It's the first teacher.
I mean, this whole conversation makes me think of two different things, and I don't know if I can easily say this, but I feel like over the progression of hundreds of years that the life force, or I don't know what drives us, has started from here and has slowly been creeping up until the point where it's beyond our heads now. Like, yes, we're thinking and we're using a whole bunch of mental horsepower when we use this social media stuff and all that, but it's beyond that now. Like we're in servers and we're in clouds and we're in these imaginary conversations and arguments with strangers who may be fake. They may be bots on the other end that we're arguing with, and
Right.
it's we're moving from feeling and heart to head and thinking, rationalizing, obsessing, all that kind of stuff into just this, something that's beyond us. But in that as well, it makes me think that we're in northern Michigan right now because of the nature piece of what's up here. And it's sad that there's all this technology and all this stuff that we do on screens today, and how funny enough we're on screens right now, but
That's right.
but
They're not
but
always bad.
no, no, they're not. But when we're spending 80% of our days in front of screens, and there's all this nature around us, oceans and rivers and mountains and lakes, around here. It's like all this stuff is essentially going to waste because we're not out in it as much as we were before. Instead, we're in front of our screens having fake conversations and arguments with dipshits on the other end. Like, what are we doing here?
I like it when the dipshits take over the arguments for themselves, and they just start arguing
I
amongst
was
themselves in the comments.
I was thinking that there was that time. I have joked with you many times on what you've posted, and the person then attacked me.
Yeah.
And you like, I'm like, "Wha-
Yeah, that was a friend of
why?
mine. I'm like,
For
dude,
what?"
I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like, relax. And I think it's funny. What I was doing yesterday was, so this guy was talking about Elon. Like, I made a post. I'm like, isn't it funny how a lot of the people that despise Elon the most are the ones that buy his cars? Because I have a good friend of mine who hates Elon Musk, just can't fucking stand him, drives a Tesla. I'm like, it's ironic. But this guy was like, well, he met with Vladimir Putin, and I'm like, and you feel that that's a bad thing? And he's like, well, yes. I'm like, well, why is it bad? And he's like, well, you don't think it's bad? I'm like, I'm not saying it is or isn't, but why do you feel it's bad? And dude, this
Right.
guy
Well,
could not, and
but
he fucking imploded. It was just a walk.
but I don't know what this guy was mad about. But get beyond the meeting. Like it sounds like that's where it stopped. Like what was the context of the
He has no
conversation? That's the
idea, and
more
that's the
important
point.
thing.
And it's like, so you just like, so we just don't, we just, and what I never got to because this guy stopped responding was, like JFK met with the leader of Russia to stop the Cuban Missile Crisis, and had he not done that, had we not talked and used words, we could have fucking faced nuclear war. We might not be here right now. So why is it a bad thing to talk to people that you disagree with or you think are bad? Like we all have something to learn from everybody.
Yeah, you could be a religious zealot without being in a church.
Yeah.
The political party just becomes your religion. That you become religious. We have a lot of religious zealots.
Yeah, like there's a lot of people that their religion is Taylor Swift. It's fucking crazy.
Yep.
Fuck, there was something else that you said in there, Josh, that reminded me of something, but I damn it, I don't remember what it is now. So shit.
It'll come back to you in about 6 hours.
Yeah, yeah. That is one
That
thing
was
that
the
I've been better at is remembering things and coming back to it later on. Oh man. So we're gonna see you in what? Not even what, a week? A week from yesterday we'll be seeing you,
from
Marty.
yesterday.
Right.
Yeah.
What time are you getting in, Josh?
Yeah.
10:30.
Okay, I'll be there at
Yeah.
11. So I'll just, and you're flying into Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just
Yeah.
wait.
Where else would you
Well,
fly
you can
into?
fly into Scottsdale. It's just super expensive. There's a region
It's
like that.
also much further away than
Oh,
where you're actually
I don't
going.
know. I just look for the cheapest flight. I don't pay attention to any of that stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys got anything else?
No, I don't have anything else to add other than I think this is an important conversation and things that, I don't know. I feel like more people should be having rather than the alternative of, two people squaring off because they're of different religions and one person telling the other person why their religion is bad. It's like, come on. I think the ultimate goal of all this is to be rowing essentially in the same direction from a spirituality standpoint. And how we've deviated from that is beyond me because I feel like the arguments and the wars and all that kind of stuff that we get into over religion is defeating the fundamental purpose of religion and spirituality in the first place.
Correct.
It's like we
Yeah.
should have kind of like a collective consciousness that we all share with, like I said earlier, with different flavors of spirituality or religion that don't affect and don't cause people to dig in their heels and say, no, this is the way. No, it's like it's just a different flavor. Just we're all working towards the same thing. I wished we could get to that point.
And I mean, I would say something very similar. If you want a good indicator of where you are, if your life is about separating, there's probably very little God and spirituality in it to begin with. Because there's going to be a natural tension because we live in a world where we just tend to split. But the tension should always be trying to pull you back. And that there's so much us versus them that there's no God in any of that. There just isn't.
Yeah. And I
It's not
think
there.
a perfect example of that is when a disaster happens. When a disaster happens, all of the other shit goes out the window. There's no labels, there's
Correct.
no division. It's all, we have a singular mission is to recover from this disaster. And you've seen it happen time and time and time again throughout human history. And in those moments, it gives me fucking hope that maybe we can, get back on track at some point in time. But my fear is that it's just going to be an endless cycle of unity through, or disaster, unity, division, disaster, unity, division. And who knows? But hopefully, just by having some of these conversations, we can make just at least a little bit of an impact on people, and showing that you don't have to fight just because you disagree. You don't have to fight over something. Like, you can actually communicate through it and learn from each other.
What a
And
crazy
sometimes,
It's
concept.
great.
You're
I know.
nuts.
Like, fuck.
yeah, and religion is its own worst enemy. It is the one that does the splitting a lot of the time.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Well, gentlemen, this has been great. Marty, thank you so much for the time. Enjoy Flagstaff, and we will be seeing you a week from yesterday.
I know. Here we are. It'll be November already.
I
I
can't
know,
believe
it's
that because
crazy.
I can't believe that because it was 90 degrees here yesterday, and this is still very new to me. Like, this is my
It's
first
like
Texas
it's
fall.
like that here.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Phoenix was supposed to be 100 today, but by next weekend it'll be cooler.
How's it in northern Michigan, Josh?
Very similar to where I am back home, like 55, 60, something like that right now.
Nah, you're fine.
No.
All right, guys.
Currently here it's 45, which is cool.
Ooh, yeah. All right.
Nice.
Not here. It's like 60 something, but all right, guys. I'm gonna end the recording. We'll talk soon.
Alrighty.
Thank